You ever just like have those months where you genuinely cannot remember what you read? That is me this month. I don't know what happened. I feel like I went into like some sort of void. I actually do know what happened. I went into a deep dive of a series and like got stuck there for a little while, in the best way possible. But it made me forget literally everything else that I read. I literally had to go on Goodreads and go, what did I read? And it was a surprise. It was absolutely a surprise. So today we're gonna go over all of the things I read this month and remember them together. Back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Kyla, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. We're actually going to start with something a little bit different. I've never really done this in my wrap-ups before, but it's something that I really wanted to start doing this year, and that is to keep monthly and quarterly and yearly reading stats. It was one of my goals this year, and we are doing it. So I actually like set up a little page in my bullet journal. You can't actually see the writing from here, but like I set it up kind of cute, and we're just gonna go over my stats real quick and then we'll dive into the books that I actually read. So my genres this month were fantasy, thriller, mystery, and horror, which like that tracks. That's pretty much the genres that I read from majority of the time. I read 3,351 pages, which honestly I'm actually a little shocked by because it didn't feel like I read that much. But then when I added it up, I was like, oh snap. And like, I guess it makes sense, and we'll get there on why, but like, I was a little shooketh by that number, but like a great surprise. My ratings, I had 3 stars slash like 3.5s in that realm. 4 stars. Isn't that weird how that worked out? 3 stars and 4 stars. Strange. And 8 5 stars, which is like astronomical and a lot, but at the same time, again, we'll get to why a certain series took over my life, and it was very easy to give out 5 stars. I had 3 library books this month, which actually is not a lot for me at all. Like, it's okay, you know, we're still utilizing them, it's fine. And this one is the one that I was like most excited about because I don't know, I'm just like such a numbers gal that I really wanted to keep track of it. So by using the library, I saved $55.77. I spent on books this month $26.29, and so that leaves me with like a plus of $29.48. So like I'm in the positive of how much I spent to how much I saved by using the library, and that's where like I always want to be. It doesn't have to be an astronomical number every single month. I just always want to be in the positive, and that's why I'm using the library, to save money. So that shows me that we are doing it. We're doing it. So I'm very happy about that. I do also keep track of my favorites and my least favorites, but we're gonna talk about that in detail, so I don't have to share it with you right off the bat. But let me know if you like starting off with reading stats or you like hearing about them, if you want me to continue sharing in my wrap-ups. I know it's something a little bit new for me, but if you like seeing that or hearing about the numbers, like, are you a nerd like me? I hope so if you're here. So let me know in the comments what you think of the reading stats. Should I include them monthly? Just do them every once in a while? Just do like a quarterly wrap up? Let me know. And yeah, okay, let's talk about the books that I forgot about this month. Typically I go in order of star rating. This month I'm just gonna go in order of how I read them because that makes the most sense in my brain this month, and like I like to keep you on your toes. So the first book that I read this month was Magic, Lies, and Deadly Pies. I actually started this the end of December, but I didn't finish it until the beginning of January, and I didn't talk about it anywhere, so I'm including it in this video, and I gave it 4 stars. This was such a fun, cozy mystery. I love it. If you are a lover of cozy mysteries and food, this book is for you, because obviously Magic Lies and Deadly Pies, we have so much talk of food in here. Not only does our main character make these pies, but she also works in a diner, so there's a lot of food talk there, and oh my goodness, it was just so freaking fun. This one is one that I actually remembered that I read because I enjoyed it so much, and I do know that this is the first in a series, and I absolutely want to continue. I have never read from Misha Pop before, but I really enjoyed her writing and her storytelling. There's also a bit of a romance in here, which is like super cute, and I really loved the mystery. It really reminded me of like Finley Donovan almost, but like with a little bit of a twist, and I just really enjoyed it. I ate it up, pun intended. And I just had a great time. I mean, it's fun, it's deadly, there's a mystery. What more could you ask for? Also, this cover is just so freaking cute. I just loved it. And I loved our main protagonist. I just thought she was so fun and real, while also being like a little bit naive at the same time, which is honestly relatable in so many ways. Like the things that she's going through and the feelings that she's experiencing, it was just very relatable. And I was like, I see you. I see you. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And then we get into the chunk of books which I read for Winterween, which I did vlog my experience of Winterween. I actually have 2 vlogs for Winterween, so I will link them both below. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each individual book because I did talk about them in the vlogs more excessively, but I did have 2 DNFs. I guess I should include that in the reading stats, huh? Reminder to future Kyla to actually update that page and put in your DNFs. I did have 2 DNFs. The first one was Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw. Look, I love The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw, but this one was not it for me. To me, it was so overwritten, and it's actually shocking to me that Wicked Deep came out first, because this felt like she was really like finding her footing and just felt so overwritten. It was so flowery, and just every single thing was described, and I mean like described and then described some more, and it was just too much. It was absolutely too much, and that's just not my kind of writing. And it just felt like 2 different authors to me. Like, I don't know what happened. It did not feel like the same author that wrote The Wicked Deep wrote Winterwood, and I just don't know. So anyways, it was a DNF for me. And then the second one that I DNF'd was Murder Your Employer by Rupert Holmes, and this one actually makes me real sad because I was really looking forward to this book. I had heard such incredible things about it. I thought it was gonna be right up my alley, and honestly, the first like 100 pages, because I gave this a fair shot, okay? I definitely did. I read 150 pages before I DNF'd it, so let's just say that there. I'm not like DNFing willy-nilly, but like that's okay if I am. Anyways, I DNF'd 150 pages. The first 100 pages of this, I was like, oh, this is interesting. This reminds me of Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, with like the way the story's told and kind of breaking that fourth wall between the author and the reader, which I really enjoy. It's also British, so you have a bit of British humor in there. And the intrigue of this one was definitely there in the beginning. I mean, we have a main character who is like gung-ho on murdering his employer. There's something that happens and he was like, I need this guy D-E-A-D ASAP. So he attempts to, it doesn't go well, and then he thinks he makes like a getaway, and 2 men show up at his hotel room door and pretend to be cops, and then they're like, hey, actually, we have this school, basically like assassins that all have their own talent. We want you to come to this school and train and basically learn how to be like an assassin. And it's so interesting, and it's just like, it sounds like it would be so good, but after the 100-page mark, it just got so boring. Like, once we're at the school, there's just so much talk about different ways to murder people, which is fine to a certain extent, but it just is so long and descriptive, and I just did not care about anything that was happening at this school. I was more interested in like, let's have them go out and like try to do all of these things and see what happens, but it was just so much like, we're at the school, we're learning about it, but we're not actually taking any action. And from what I've heard, I haven't like been completely spoiled, but from what I've heard, it's like the whole book is like that. There's not much like climax at the end, so I was totally okay DNFing, and yeah, makes me sad, but here we are. The first book that I actually read for Winterween and finished was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. I gave this 3.5 stars. The atmosphere of this book is absolutely incredible. It is all the vibes you want in the wintertime. It's creepy. We have that winter setting. It's very ominous. Also have that dual timeline going on, which I love from Jennifer McMahon. It honestly makes her stories so interesting. I just absolutely love the dual timeline, and she does it so well where it's not confusing in the slightest, which I really appreciate, especially being someone who listens a lot to a lot of audiobooks. I read this in tandem, but still, I think it's really important to have, you know, very distinctive voice to each of them. Anyways, it was great. I also really love that this takes place in Vermont. I'm a New England gal, so I just always really appreciate when things take place in New England. I feel like I've been picking up so many books recently that do, and it just makes me so happy. So in this one, we have the timeline that's happened back in the day, where we have this mother who unfortunately has lost her son, and then her daughter goes missing and turns up, you can imagine, and everything kind of spirals from there. You can imagine the mental state she's in after losing 2 children. The town and her husband start thinking that she might, you know, be a little bit mentally unwell, and the story goes from there. And then we have the present day timeline where we are following 2 girls whose mom has gone missing. Don't know where she is. They're left to themselves, trying to put the pieces together of what could have happened to her. These timelines obviously intersect at some point, and I really enjoyed, I would say, like the first half of this, again with the atmosphere and the dual timelines. It just can't help but be gripped by it, but I did find myself after the halfway mark feeling like it was dragging on a little bit, and this is a problem that I have with a lot of horror. I feel like horror does so much better when it's short, and not that this was overly long. I think it's like 350 pages or something like that, so not wildly long, but for me, horror does and packs a punch better when it's shorter. So I just felt like it was dragging on a little bit, and I really just wanted to get to like what was going on and how these timelines intersected. We do eventually get there, but it just felt like it was taking forever, and I just felt like I was losing myself and losing a lot of interest in what was going on. So by the time the ending came around, I was like, okay, cool, great, we did it. And clearly I didn't really remember, so 3.5 for this one. And then I read Their Vicious Games by Joelle Wellington, and this is one that was like so highly anticipated. I love the cover of this book so much. It's absolutely stunning, and it was pitched to me as like Pretty Little Liars meets like Bunny and Heathers and all of those, you know, buzzwords. So I was like, oh, I really enjoy all of those things. Yes, okay, I like Pretty Little Liars. Sue me, okay? It's fantastic and terrible, and I love it. So I was like, I'm all in. If it's anything like that, yes. And while I don't think it necessarily has that much in common with Pretty Little Liars, I can see where the reference comes from in like a small way. So in this one, we are following Adina, and Adina has a scholarship to go to an Ivy League, but then something happens and she loses her scholarship. And she learns about this kind of game that goes on that she can kind of compete with some of the other local students to regain her scholarship and kind of earn her place in the world. And there's already so much at stake for her as she is a woman of color. So there's just so many layers to this going on, and I loved, we talked about race and class and privilege and all of that. What I will say is that I loved the reveal of like what happens at these games, because you go in thinking one thing and then there's like a little bit of a twist and you're like, wait, what? What? That's why we're here? Okay. So I really liked the first twist, but from there, this book just gets so unhinged and over the top, which honestly is like Pretty Little Liars, okay? Like, my friend Jess absolutely said it, because in the vlog I was like, I don't know if this is really like that at all. It's not really giving me those vibes. And then she was like, well, Pretty Little Liars is over the top. And I was like, you are so right. But at the same time, I think I was just expecting like more themes of that, but it just gets over the top and crazy, and just, I think there's a time and a place for an over-the-top thriller, but I think I was just not expecting it, so it kind of caught me off guard, and I didn't really love where the story went and where we ended up, and honestly didn't really connect at all with any of the characters. Like Pretty Little Liars, the characters are everything, and like we do have, you know, that kind of head honcho mean girl going on, so like in that way it is, but there's just so many other things that make it not, that I'm like, I don't know if I really want to say the reference, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, this just goes like over the top, whatever, and I like just lost my interest and was not really invested in any of the characters, stories, and backlines, and the ending of this book is just, it's too much, and it just really turned me off. I didn't enjoy where it went. So yeah, I had to give it 3.5 stars. It makes me a little bit sad because I was really looking forward to this one. It was a fun time. I'm not saying don't read it. It just was not everything that I was expecting. The Winterween started off on a huge rough note for me. Clearly, 2 DNFs, 2 3 stars, but we ended on a 5-star, and this book, I cannot stop thinking about it. It's just me. It's me in a book. If you want to know my reading taste, or at least part of my reading taste, it's this, and I could not gush about this book enough, and it's The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I wish I could go back and read this again for the first time. I had checked this out from the library and literally 2 days later went out and bought myself a copy. That's how much I loved it. Like immediately I was like, I need this in my hands. I need it in my hands. I loved it so much. This is a book I can see myself rereading so many times. It's cozy. It's like a warm hug. There's magic. It's found family. Which, if you know anything, you know that's my favorite trope ever. I love found family, and this is one of the cutest found family stories ever. It's right up there with House in the Cerulean Sea. They're very comparable, so if you enjoyed House in the Cerulean Sea, I think you will absolutely love this. So in this one, we are following Micah Moon, which, like, coolest name on the freaking planet. Are you kidding me? I want my name to be Micah Moon. We are following Micah Moon, and she is taught her whole life that she is not to be around any other witches. She has magical abilities, but every witch is supposed to be independent. They're not supposed to congregate because bad things can happen. So she spent her whole life alone. She's had a very tough upbringing. She spent her whole adult life alone. It's really fun actually because she takes to social media to like pretend to be a witch, even though she actually is. And one day somebody comes across her video and is like, that's the one. That's the one. We need help at our school for witches. We need someone to come and teach these girls how to use their magic. And so they hire Micah to come and live at the school and teach these young witches how to use their magic. And it just goes off from there in such a beautiful way. These 3 girls are absolutely hilarious. I highly recommend the audiobook because their voices are so cute, but also just the voices of everyone. The school is run by 2 gay men who are in a relationship, Ken and Ian, and they are absolutely adorable. Ian is very much Arthur Parnassus of House in the Cerulean Sea. If you know the vibes, you know the vibes, and he fits it spot on, and his voice in the audiobook is just perfect. And then of course we have a romance in here. It has everything that you could possibly want. I need all of my cozy fantasy friends to read this book if you haven't already. I feel like I'm late to the game, but if you haven't and you love cozy cozy fantasy and like that is your vibe, this book is for you. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. I can't stop thinking about it. I want to reread it this fall. I have a feeling I will actually, because I really want to do a lot of rereading this year. And I just feel like this one is going to be at top of my list because it was just great. It was perfect. I got a little misty at the end. It was so cute. I don't have anything else to say. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. We have the book that I read for the book troop this month, which was Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I ended on I'm still in between. I feel like a 4.5 for this one. And this is one that like I can't necessarily put my finger on why it's not a perfect 5-star for me, but there's just something about it in my bones telling me it's a 4.5. So that's really all I could say. Take that with a grain of salt. This book is up there. It's so incredibly well done. This book is inspired by the Ted Bundy case. In this book, his name is never mentioned though, because this book highlights the women and their stories. This one, we are following Pamela. We actually have multiple point of views. So our first point of view is Pamela. She is the president of the sorority. And if you know anything about the case, you know that one of his last crimes was taking place at a sorority, so she's the president of the sorority. She sees him leaving that night, and it follows her experience in the aftermath of what happened. And then we're also following the timeline of Ruth, who was one of the last victims from this state park that he had went to during the lake day or whatever. So we're following like the lead up in her story up until the day of, and it's just so incredibly well done and highlights just the right areas. This focus a lot on the lack of investigation, support, and just the overall disgust from every man that was involved in this case, from lawyers, police department, spouses, friends, the judge, the judge. And if you know anything about the real case, like it highlights a lot of what happened and like a way of not speaking about him specifically, but oh my goodness. This really does like pack a punch, and if you are a fan of true crime, you will definitely enjoy this. There's also so many other themes going on in here, from talking about sexuality and how that plays in, and different relationships, and how each one of these women was affected in a different way, and how the media spun things, and how law enforcement did not do what they were supposed to do. Just so many underlying things here that were talked about, but talked about in a very different light in the real world, and this highlights the experience of the women and what they went through and what it was like from their perspective. There's just something about this. Now, I'm a true crime gal, so like I don't have a problem necessarily with talking about different cases and things like that. Like I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, so that's not necessarily my struggle with this. I think some people did struggle in that way, in terms of like, was it really Jessica Knoll's story to tell in this way? Especially because the true survivor of this does have a book coming out very soon, I believe. That's not necessarily like why I don't feel like it's 5 stars. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing. I loved the perspective, and I loved that it highlighted the right people in this. There's just something about it that just like is not sitting perfectly with me, so that's why I'm giving it a 4/4.5. But other than that, I would highly recommend this. Again, if you're a fan of true crime, you will absolutely enjoy this. The audiobook was great as well. I really enjoyed that. We do have 2 different narrators to highlight the 2 different perspectives, so that was really well done. Honestly, like you could talk about this case over and over and over again, and it will never stop being absolutely baffling to me what happened and what didn't happen, and the lack of like understanding and investigation, and where the media chose to highlight him in certain ways and talk about him in certain ways. Like, it's never gonna stop being mind-blowing to me, no matter how you spin it. It's just one of those cases that honestly is just like, how did it happen? But I think this book did an incredible job of having the right conversations and really just being like the feminist view on it that we all needed. So now let's talk about where all of my freaking 5 stars came from this month, because 8 is a lot. I mean, we did have one already, but we did have quite a few 5 stars. And it's because I read the entire Wayward Children series this month. So this is where a lot of my 5 stars came from, because this series is absolutely incredible. I love it so much. I mean, honestly, like, if you have not read this and you like fantasy, or you're looking for a dip into fantasy, this is the perfect place to start, because they are very short. So yes, it is a long series, but these are fantasy novellas, so they're perfect for people who want to start reading fantasy, and it's so incredibly easy to follow. Now, I do have an entire vlog that is almost an hour long, because how could it not be, talking about all of these books in detail, so I am not going to spend a ton of time going through them all with you. That would just be too repetitive and too much. So I'm just going to quickly go through my ratings, share why some of them were a little bit lower and why I loved about them. So as a whole, I love this series so much. One, it's accessible. Like I said, the readability is so up there for whether you're into fantasy or not. The portal fantasy and the doors is so easy to follow. In the series, we have kids who have been to other worlds through doors, and whether that be a place like Candyland or the underworld or what have you, and then have been bounced back, and they're feeling a bit out of sorts from being in such like incredible places and then trying to adapt to the real world again, and they get sent away to this place called the Wayward School for Children, who is run by Eleanor West, who she herself has been to and through another door and bounced back again, so she tries to help these kids acclimate. And the odd numbers of the books, so one and then every other from there, follow students at the school, and then the even numbers, we follow a specific student and get their kind of backstory. And I just love it that way, because it definitely mixes it up and it keeps you on your toes. You don't really know what story you're gonna get or whose book is next, and I love that. Also, these books have the most incredible representation across the board. You could not ask for anything better. We have representation from every race you could possibly imagine, every gender you could possibly imagine, every sexuality you could possibly imagine, mental health conditions, disabilities, and just DNA makeup. Everything from like being albino, we have intersex characters, we have non-binary characters, like literally everything you could possibly imagine, and the research on them is so well done. It's not taken lightly at all, and what I also love about these books is that they sound light and cozy, but they're actually extremely dark. This one, we have a murder mystery that we're solving, there's a murder that takes place at the school, there's a lot of darker themes woven in throughout all of these, but the darker themes are handled with such grace and care, especially because we're talking about kids. They're incredible. I also highly recommend the audiobooks, because each character has their own distinct voice, not necessarily their own distinct narrator, but their own distinct voice. You can tell whose is who depending upon their accent or the way they talk or where they've been, etc. So highly recommend. Anyways, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Let's go through my rating. So the first one, 5 stars. This one gives me just like the tinglies. I freaking love it. It feels like a warm hug. This one, while it does follow a murder mystery, I just love it. It feels so warm and cozy to me. It feels nostalgic at this point, even though I only read it for the first time like 2 years ago. I did reread it this month, but like I read it for the first time 2 years ago. But for some reason, it just feels so nostalgic to me. And this whole series as a whole does. It very much is like, you know, if you read like Lemony Snicket's or any sort of just fantasy series as a kid, it feels very nostalgic and I love it. So this one is 5 stars. Then we have Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which is also 5 stars. I freaking love this one. It follows 2 twins named Jack and Jill, which like, funny. This is their individual story and it is very dark, but I love it. This one is the one that has stuck with me the most. Well, up until I have read some of these other ones, this is the one that had stuck with me the most. It is one of my standout absolute favorites. I love it so much. And then we have Beneath the Sugar Sky, which is more of a fun, lighthearted one. I love this one so much. It's so funny. Like, this is definitely the laughter we needed before we got into some of the other books, because this one is not as dark. There are some dark things that happen, but it's not as dark as some of the other ones. And the main character that we're following here is named Reenie. She's the daughter of one of the other characters, but like from the future, and she comes back and they have to go off an adventure and try to save something, and it's so fun. But Reenie is so hilarious, and the audiobook for this one is incredible, so 5 stars for sure. Then we have our first 4-star in the series, which is In an Absent Dream. This one follows Lundy, and she is kind of like Eleanor West's like sidekick in the first one. She helps run the school. This is her story, from like what door she goes through and all of that, and this one was just okay. It's not like my overall favorite. It's not terrible. None of these are bad, by the way, but it's just not a standout one for me. It's not one that I think about often or think about rereading often. It's just okay. However, I will say the epilogue of this one, incredible. And then we have Come Tumbling Down, which is kind of the follow-up to Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which I'm actually so happy that we got. This was the first like new one that I read this month, because I had read books 1 through 4 before, and this one, oh my god, it was like the follow-up to this one and everything that I wanted and needed, because this one does leave a bit of a cliffhanger, so we get the kind of answers that we're looking for and just the more adventure in this one that we're looking for. And oh my goodness, this one is also very dark as well, but like in the best way. In the best way. And I just love seeing the characters' growth through all of this. This one also ends very dramatically, and it is like something that like I didn't necessarily see coming, but I'm so happy I read it, and it was 5 stars. And then we have Across the Green Grass Field, which this one is like a 3.5 for me. This one was just okay. In this one, I do love that we are following an intersex main character. I have never read from an intersex main character before, at least I don't think so. So I'm so happy that we got that representation in here, and I do love Reagan as a character overall. She goes to a world where there are centaurs and unicorns, which like so cool, but overall the story was just okay for me. It's heartbreaking for sure, but it's not something that's going to stick with me for like a long time. There are definitely others in the series that are like pure standouts, and this one was just okay. And then we have Where the Drowned Girls Go, which was a 5-star for me. In this one we are following almost like another school. So in this one we are following Cora, who is one of our main characters throughout the whole series. Something happens to her in one of the other books, and she feels like Eleanor West School's not the place for her. So we actually go to a different school, and I loved getting the different setting. I think that it was just a fun way to like mix up the series a little bit, and the school is much darker than Eleanor West. The things that they learn there is a lot different from what they're learning at Eleanor West School, and I just loved the different atmosphere. I don't love what happened there, but I loved the different atmosphere. And we also get introduced to some new characters in this one, which is fun. You know, you have to like keep adding to the series to make it interesting. While I do love reading from the core group, I think having new characters to follow and different worlds to go into obviously makes this series. So I love this one. It felt very transitional, but in a really good way. So gave it 5 stars. And we have probably the most heartbreaking of the stories is Lost in the Moment and Found. This one is very difficult to read in the beginning because it does cover essay of a child. Now, there is a warning at the beginning of the book, and our main character, Ancy, actually runs before anything can really happen to her, so there is that. So it's still worth reading. Just the first like 30 to 50 pages are very difficult to get through, and the audiobook for this one is absolutely gut-wrenching. Her little voice is so small on the audiobook. Like, she just sounds like a tiny little bean. I mean, she's only like 6 years old, so she sounds very young. It's not in like an annoying way though, and the way the story goes, like, you can't think of her that way at all because you can't help but feel for her. It does end in a very hopeful way, and she continues in the series, and it's great. So have that in mind, but this one is very difficult to read, but it's definitely one of my standout favorites. I loved it. It was 5 stars. It's perfect. I love Ancy so much, and she really comes into her own power, and I really appreciate that. And Shauna Maguire also talks about like her own experience, so she put a lot of like tender care into this book as well. You can tell that it was handled with such grace, but she also poured so much heart into it, and it's just really sad to think about. So anyways, we have that one, and then we have the newest edition, which was also 5 stars for me. This is Mislaid in Parts Half Known. This is the new one that just came out in January, and I loved it. Again, this feels like a bit of a transitional book. We do have some follow-ups as to what happened with some of the other characters in the series. We also get a little bit more insight into some of our main characters' stories and their worlds, like before actually getting their whole books. So I really appreciate that. But this felt almost like a recap, I guess, because whenever certain characters were brought up, it was like, oh, we have, you know, Reagan, was she the one that did this and went there, and, you know, they kind of recap it in that way. But also this covers the doors and what happens to like time, and explains just the overall portal fantasy a little bit more, which I don't really feel like we needed that much. But regardless, I still love the story, and I love the way it went, and I love the adventure that they went on. And also, even though this cover has dinosaurs on it, we only spent a little bit in the Lost World, which is the world of the dinosaurs. I wish we got more of it, but I still absolutely loved the quest that they went on, so I had to give it 5 stars, and I love the ending of this one. I just think it was so perfect and wholesome, and also really sad and heartbreaking at the same time. I definitely got a little misty at the end of this one, and it just makes me that much more excited for the next one in the series, which hopefully will come out next year. So that is my overall experience with the Wayward Children series. I am eagerly awaiting Christopher's book. He is my absolute favorite character, or at least like top 3 favorite characters. I love Christopher, and I need his backstory so much. There's just something about him. He's precious, and I just need his story immediately. So I hope, fingers crossed, it's one of the next books. So yeah, those are all of the books that I read in the month of January. It feels like January was like 3 months long. It felt so long. So fingers crossed I actually like remember what I read in February, because this month felt like, I feel like I read some of these books like months ago. Just absolutely bonkers. Anyways, in the comments, let me know what your favorite book of January was, as well as your least favorite book of January, and if you plan on picking up any of these. Also, let me know about the stats, what you think about that. If you want to see more of it, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Do not forget to subscribe if you are not already. Turn on the bell so you never miss a video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
With you and I, the future is bright.